with regard to the focus, rather, on carbon is known as what sort of chemistry? Whole buildings are committed to it. I've already said it, the word today once.
That's what I'm trying to.
You might see the word at the grocery store as well.
Oh, organic.
It's organic chemistry. Okay, 4 building blocks. We have discussed 2.5. We've seen 3 of them, but we haven't quite finished it. Can you give me one of these 4 building blocks, Fred? You read and took notes over one of them.
Proteins.
You two did proteins, right?
Yeah.
Proteins are one of the 4 building blocks. Bam, hit me with another one. Lipids. Give me a better word for lipids. Fat. Fats. Oils. Okay. Give me another one, RJ.
Wax.
So let me be more specific. Give me another building block. We saw lipids, proteins. There's one that I talked about before. Nitrogen-containing things are called phospholipids. Hold on. You're trying to think carboxyl because we looked at carboxyl groups yesterday. Carbohydrates. There's the third one, and there's one more that we haven't talked about that I'll have you tell us about a little bit today. But we are moving on. Basic function. What do carbs do? They give energy or they store energy. Those are the 2 things that they do. What do lipids do? There's one big thing at the end. We talked about how phospholipids are used in cells, and something about when you try to mix oil and water. That same idea showed up yesterday. Say that again. So it doesn't mix, but that means that we find lipids along cell membranes so that they can regulate the water in and out. That's a huge function of them. Now, eventually in our bodies, what winds up happening is all these things convert, right? There's chemical reactions that changes things to what we need them to be. Chicken isn't pure protein. It's a lot of protein in it, but it also has these other pieces as well, and our body breaks it down and assigns it as needed. Okay, at the end of the lesson yesterday, let me see here. We're talking about proteins. Okay, this one, I guarantee I ask questions about it, but I'm not going to be crazy with the chemistry other than the definition-y stuff. You're not going to have to do chemistry, but you're going to have to know how to talk about it. Proteins are made of how many amino acids? A protein is made of 20 different amino acids that have combined together. Now, amino acids, they do not all look exactly like this, but this is the basic rundown. We have a carbon at the center along with a hydrogen up here. Cool? On this other side, we have these, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. The amino group, we have the carboxyl group, and then this one is what? R is the variable group. This can be a bunch of different things. And there's 20 choices for this. Okay, so when we think about this, and I don't know why I used crazy numbers yesterday. What's 20 times 20?
Like 40. 400.
400 times 20.
400 times 20.
8,000, I think, because you just double the number and add a 0, right? Could we keep going, you think?
Yeah.
Now, I can only do a few of them. Can anybody do that 20 times in your head? I can even do 2 times 2 20 times in my head. That number gets big. That large number that we look at, and I'm just going to ask the calculator real quick. 2 to the power of 20. I don't know if my calculator will be able to tell me what this number is. 10. So let's see. There's 1,048,576 combinations of amino acids that could chain together in groups of 20. Okay. A million different amino acids that can form here, or combine. A million ways to combine them, which means that's how many actual proteins. Yesterday I just made up a number without doing the math that I think was a little bit too big, but it's insane. Now, amino acids, they get made. Cool, fine, deal. They look like these. You tie 20 of them together and you get a protein. And when you tie them together, what we call it is a peptide bond. That's where we left off. Now, moving on. Protein group. Can you tell me anything else? Is that something you read, or is that just something you were trying to recall?
No, that's something we read.
Okay.
In the book, it says like it helps with the like new skin cells, helps with like hair growth.
Yeah. So yesterday I made a comment at the end, and if you didn't catch it as you were leaving, that's all right. Let me find the right side here. We need to discuss, like we've done with all of these, what is the function of these proteins? Function or functions of proteins. Now, there's a lot of them. And I made the comment yesterday, everything. And it turns out, kind of, like legitimately, not super exaggerating, everything relies on protein. Now, as we look at that, just a few examples. We don't need to write everything. Your cells need to have structure, right? They can't just be floating globs that don't hold their shape. What do you think is responsible for the structure? Not the membrane on the outside, that's a phospholipid, but that actually keeps the cell structured instead of just falling in on itself. Proteins. Check it out. Cell structure is a protein. Anything else? Do cells need to communicate with each other? And not literally, I don't think. I'm trillions of cells, but I'm not a cell. Cells need to share information somehow. Because if this cell has too much of something, it's going to have to get rid of it, and somebody else has to agree to take it. And agree, right? These things aren't really like communicating. It's a chemical reaction that's happening. But they have to be able to talk to each other. Quote unquote talk. So it turns out that transporting information, and not only information, but just transporting resources or transport material between cells is another thing that proteins do. Now, there are a few of these that you have seen before. Maybe. We talked about things in our body that speed up chemical reactions so that we can get them. Anybody recall what they were? Things that speed up or catalyze is what the word we use. Biological catalyst. Starts with an E and ends with enzyme. It's an enzyme. Okay, so check it out. Enzymes that we had like discussions about, these are proteins. Whoa, I just wrote protein instead of enzyme. Okay, so these enzymes exist for a lot of different things. You can find them all over your body. But there's more that this does. Cells grow, and it's kind of linked to this, but if a cell wants to grow, it needs resources or materials that need to be transported from one cell to the other. We already talked about transporting materials. A follow-up to that, if you want to include it, is cell growth. We need proteins to help cells grow, because inevitably, cells grow, they live, they die. They get replaced with a new cell that needs to be grown and have the resources to do so, which it receives via enzymes and proteins. Okay, last little part of this. You do not have to draw these, but I'm kind of psyched about it. When we talk about the functions of it, there's a lot. Pretty much every process in your body relies on proteins. The last little piece that we're going to talk about proteins, and it's going to be a nice segue into your stuff, is their structure. Now, we've already seen that their structure can be kind of strange. And this part is going to zoom out a little bit. This is how we draw the structure of a single amino acid. And I'm not going to do it, but can you imagine if I drew 20 of these things next to each other? So I'm going to draw 2 of them next to one another. I'm going to ask the same question. Could you imagine that I drew 20 of these together? And they could join together like that, right? Now, on paper, that's all fine and dandy, but in our body, it's not like there's just a little C sitting there, right? Like there's a carbon atom, but it's not just sitting flat on a piece of paper like this. When we look at proteins, these guys have a few different variations. And just checking them out. The first of these, and this is kind of formal in all honesty, glob. It can be a glob. Or globular is what you could say. What's a glob look like? So show me with your hands. Can you make a glob shape with your hands? Or can you draw a glob on your margin? Maybe that's easier. Draw on the side of your page a glob. Jay, draw a glob on the side of your page. You're going to draw one here in a second. I just want to make sure that it's the same. Yeah. Draw me a blob. Whatever blob is to you. I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. Pretty globby, I like it. Okay, it's just kind of like in my head, I think just this, just right, like it's no real defined shape, it's just a glob. So check it out. Some proteins, when they bond, and I'll show you the picture with all these chemicals and groups attached to it as well, but some form globs, and they look just something like this. Now, do you guys know any of the things that are in your blood? Like obviously, I don't know how much biology you see. You saw a little bit with Miss Forfietta 2 or 3 years ago. White blood cells, what do they do? They fight, right? They literally, like, it's cool when you see it. They literally eat the bad guys. Clump like this. Okay. There's oxygen in your blood, right? How does the oxygen get carried around your blood? Your blood. Red blood cells. Okay. Red blood cells. You may not have ever heard this. There's a protein that is responsible for carrying the oxygen. That's part of that transport. You guys ever heard the word hemoglobin? Okay, so we will, just so you know. But I want to really focus in on this. Hemoglobin. You do not have to write it. You can. I'm sure we'll see it again. Here's an example, or here's hemoglobin. It's an example of this globular shape. Hemoglobin. You do not have to use the capital letters like I did there, but I did it for a very intentional reason. Hemoglobin. What do you think its shape is?
It's a glob.
It's a glob. It's like this. Your red blood cells, we know that they look like spheres with a little bowl cut into it. That's a nice image. The thing that's actually responsible for carrying the oxygen is your hemoglobin. That's a glob shape. This is a protein. Okay, there's one way they can show up. This next one, we talked about these in the crazy just math discussion day. I showed you guys, and I had to download it, so we didn't really do it. We have these fiber structures as well. Now, I'm going to think of them as knots, fiber or knots. Now, in these ones, I don't have a specific one lined up for you. These are the ugliest pictures of proteins. And this is why we talk about topology and the shapes of three-dimensional stuff. The understanding of that math led to this and lets us do crazy stuff with it. Okay, this is one long string of stuff, right? Now, I'm not going to use all of it, but can you imagine that, like, this is a string that's made of a bunch of little things connected together, right? I know that's true. So if we imagine that this is a bunch of amino acids connected together, then we get a protein. Everybody cool with that? Yeah. Okay. Now, if they bunch up really close to each other like this, I'm just going to try my best. It's trying to untie itself. Do you agree that this shape, if they're all bunched up here, and it's a little bit neater, but this would look like a glob if I could get it tight enough? Okay. Now, in contrast with that, could I take it and just fold it in a bunch of crazy ways like this? And it's not quite a glob, but it's just kind of like a string that does this weird three-dimensional thing, right? This is our string, our fiber, our knot. I don't have a good way to draw it. I think mine looks like a knot, but they're three-dimensional and they're just folded up in all these weird ways. Now, I did not think about that scribble at all, other than the fact that there's a lot of ways that you can fold a string. Lots of ways. And the fact that there's lots of ways that they can fold means they can fold in particular ways that allow them to connect to other things. And if it's folded in one way, it can connect. If it's not, it doesn't. Just like when we talked about the active site of enzymes, if it doesn't fit, they won't connect. And that's that folding. Those scary diseases that we talked about briefly, the prion diseases, we talked about those in here, right? Mad cow disease or CJD and Kuru. Those are the result of, by chance, your body misfolding a protein and it just spiraling out of control. That is where those diseases come from. Okay. Other ways that these can form. This is such a specific word. I'm sorry? That is very possibly about prion. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Mad cow disease? Yep. Scary stuff. Okay. Pleated sheet. Do you guys know what a pleat is? Okay. Anybody in here wear suits very often? Okay. I don't either. Obviously, I dress pretty informally. I don't know. I wear t-shirt clothes. When you wear, I have a stain apparently. When you wear dress pants, if you buy a new pair, if you ever look at somebody who's dressed really nice, it's clear they've ironed their pants and there's this line down the middle. This is called a pleat. Okay. Now, when I talk about a sheet, can you imagine a flat piece of paper stretched out?
Yeah.
Like obviously there's a sheet of paper there. Now, if you take it and you fold it in half and in half and in half a bunch of times, do you agree that it's going to start to look like this? And I'm going to try my best to draw this as well as I can. Let's say here's one end of it, and then I'm going to have it go this way where it lines up and get too far. Like an accordion style, right? And I'm going to try to add a little bit of depth to it.
Oh, okay. I was like, what? Nah,
Oh, I got off somewhere. I'm just going to use really faint. My picture on my page is pretty good. Okay, it might not be, but you'll never know. Now does it look like it's a sheet that's just been folded over and over, or a piece of paper that's been folded over and over?
yeah.
And I missed a line somewhere in here, so it looks weird. Which one did I miss? Weird. And if you really wanted to make it crazy, you could say, hey, look, it falls that way, and then it falls this way, so you can add some depth to it. Right, look at us. Artisting it up. Does that look like a sheet that was flat and it's now been folded up?
Yeah.
Pleated sheet. Okay. Some proteins, when they join, they can join like this. And I'll show you with all the letters and stuff. These are 3 variations. This last one is awesome. And it's a natural kind of line into what we're going to look at. The last shape that proteins regularly show up as. And in the book, they talk about like different dimensions and stuff, which is just 1 dimension is a straight line, 2 dimension is when you have X and Y. You could have a spatial dimension. Now we're at 3. And regardless, we get this lovely shape known as a helix. Anybody ever seen that word?
Oh, yeah.
What do you know what it is? A ship? A shape. Do you know the shape?
No.
Okay. So this way it's a spiral, essentially. Now I took more time drawing it on mine than I think I would, but the 3-dimensional version will help. If I have a piece of paper, and I'm going to actually fold one here. Okay, so imagine that I have a protein here, and it just happens to be a big flat piece of paper. I've already seen it can fold itself up to be that pleated sheet, but there's another variation of it. If I want this thing to fit in a really small space, and it's not going to work perfectly with paper, but I think I can fit a bunch more information if I spin it like this. And now notice it takes up less space than it did here, but it's still the same paper and all the same information is there. The shape that you're seeing right now is a helix.
Oh, isn't the DNA on the
What? Okay, so as we get there, I'm going to draw it like this. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take these little, I just take a gap to look. It's like a spring, right? If you leave this gap, it looks more like a spring than it does a swirl, as long as it shows that it's passing behind it. Cool. This is a helix shape. Now, when we look at these and the chemistry part of it, it's obviously a roll. Mine's not great, but I do want to show it off because I'm not a great artist and I'm kind of proud of it. There's my helix. It kind of looks like it. I messed up in here somewhere and I couldn't figure it out or care enough. But check it out. When we see the book's version of this, here is a pleated sheet. That's all fine and dandy. Focus. Boom. Check it out. We have our brightness getting turned up first and foremost. But secondly, we have a carbon. And connected to it is a nitrogen, like a variable group. Here we have oxygen, which fits somewhere within carboxyls. And then we get our hydrogen that ties on as well. These are a bunch of amino acids. And in fact, I bet if we counted them, we'd probably get 20 of them, is my guess. I didn't actually go through and count. But 20 amino acids makes a protein. Here's how those line up. And instead of just living flat like they do on a piece of paper, in reality, things aren't flat. And they have the opportunity to join like that. In contrast, check it out. The same amino acids. And they're just generalizing here. These aren't the actual amino acids. Here's our helix. And all these things bond, and for some reason, not our focus, they bond and they form this 3-dimensional helix shape. Now, Andrew, you said something awesome a second ago, and I'm going to ask you that about that helix shape here in just a minute. Last section, carbs, proteins, lipids. They all play a role. They're all important. They're all equally important, but let's get real. Proteins are where it's at, right? Like, I don't really have a strong opinion, but I appreciate that it made you smile at least a little bit. Cool. So the last section, man, I just am running out of memory. Man, I don't want to delete all this. Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can't move a little stuff around to get a little bit more space.
Oh. You can't save that? Like, you can't save that whole page?
I mean, I can, but the only thing that I don't like about this program is I don't understand why they wouldn't just allow me to let this go forever and then separate it later. Like, this is the biggest that I can make this canvas. And I have a little bit more, but I want it to be on the same page, but I just can't make it happen.
You just like zoom in like very, very far.
See, and I've had that thought, but check it out. If I zoom in really far and I try to draw something, the resolution is too high for our technology that we have, and it starts to look blurry. Even if I try to write slow, that what still looks blurry to me.
Yeah.
I think. And it's blurry enough that I can still read it, but it's also blurry enough that it's just irritating enough that I'm not going to do it. I hate that part of it. Okay. I'm just going to zoom out 1, 2 steps, and we're going to sneak it in on the next page. And you know what? I'll just save this as a picture, and then we'll just have like half a thing there. Okay, we'll pause it while we're waiting. Okay, I want you to tell anyway. Here we go. Carbs, proteins, lipids, they're all important. What was your section? Nucleic acids. All right. Now, that looks awful. We're going to turn up that. What color is a nucleic acid?
Green.
Sure. All right. Last little section. It's still so fine. And we're doing them like this. Nucleic acids. We're going to sneak in a definition. Nucleic acid. Now, vocab is inevitably going to be a pretty big part of any science and any specialized course that you ever take, so it's unavoidable. I try to push the vocab fairly hard, but like your inability to say the vocab isn't going to kill you with everything in this class. It might make stuff harder and whatnot, so we should learn it. But here we go. Nucleic acids. Can you give me a brief explanation of what their general purpose is? Nucleic acids store and transmit genetic information. Now, when we talk about this, does that mean anything to you? What is genetic information? And that's an open question to everybody. Can you give me any example of something you consider would be genetic information?
Oh, your ancestry.
Your ancestry. So, like right now, I have brown eyes. That is a genetic thing that I've inherited from my ancestors. So I absolutely agree with you. Okay, you, I think, have brown eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, I bet one of your parents probably had brown eyes.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, it's not always the case, right? Like sometimes there's variations and mutations that happen that change eye color and things like that. However, you said a word a couple minutes ago, Andrew, that nucleic acids, not what spurred that. The helix shape that we saw made you think of what?
DNA.
So I love it. You're close. I'm going to tell you DNA is not a helix.
Oh.
DNA is a double helix,
Oh,
but
okay.
we'll deal with that. So check it out. 2 big ones, and I 100% guarantee these words are going to show up on a test. The 2 big nucleic acids that we see are DNA. That's the first one. Now, it's a double helix, which means 2 of those swirlies together. Cool. Okay, for this, DNA, it's a nucleic acid, and to be a little bit more specific, the particular things that get built up, they're called ribosomes. Okay, that's fine. We'll write it down if we need it. Here's a part that I care more about. This, I expect everybody here to know this one. DNA, what's it stand for? That's right. It is deoxy, which I'm going to let you guys catch up because we're going to think about this. Deoxy as in oxygen, right? Okay. So there's some oxygen involved in nucleic acids. Okay. I've already made the comment about ribosomes is what makes up DNA, and it's the specific proteins that form these helices. Heli? We're going to look up the plural of helix. Helix is my guess is what it is. I don't know. Deoxyribo for the ribosome part that we just spoke about. It's coming. What kind of acids are we talking about right now?
Nucleic.
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
Wait, is deoxyribonucleic all one word or?
That's one word. Deoxyribonucleic acid is what DNA is short for. Now, it is all of your genetic information that tells cells how to grow. If your DNA gets damaged via radiation or something, what happens?
Either
Radiation
adapt
poisoning?
or either adapt or
So I'll tell you, with radiation stuff specifically, it doesn't really adapt.
cancer.
You get cancer and you die. Or you get such bad radiation poisoning that you die. When somebody has radiation poisoning, like whether you get really ill or die from it, it is literally blasting your DNA and it's breaking it so your body doesn't know how to do stuff anymore. All the directions that say this is how you stay alive and how you function, all of that gets destroyed. Which is why, like, if you've never seen it, it's awful. We're not going to go super into detail. Infographics, there's a lot of it on YouTube. There was a man in Japan that got really bad radiation poisoning, not from the bombs. I mean, a lot of people in Japan died from radiation poisoning due to bombs. But in recent times that they knew he was going to die, and they thought, let's build science knowledge. And they just tracked what happened to him, and it took him like 90-something days to die, and it's like the scariest, most terrible way to die that I've ever heard of.
Can't control it.
Oh no, like, without going into too much detail, because you guys should watch it. Infographics does a good one on it that's not like terribly graphic. Your skin is constantly replacing itself, right? Like, if you didn't know this, the dust in your house is a lot of dead skin cells. Just because even doing this, I'm having dead skin cells falling off of me. You don't see them right now, but if I did this all day for a couple days, you'd see a little dust down here. It'd just be skin cells. They'd just be dead. Okay. But they fall off because my body makes new ones that replace them, and they just get pushed out and they're old, whatever. If my body doesn't know how to make skin anymore, what's going to happen? They're going to keep dying and falling off, but nothing's going to replace them. And the word that they use is slough. That skin sloughs off of people. And like, you know, if you take off a shirt or a glove, how it just pulls off? That's what happens with your skin if you get really bad radiation poisoning. That's the beginning. Like, it's awful. And it all relies on your DNA, your deoxyribonucleic acid, being destroyed.
Fallout.
Yeah, fallout.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can animals like adapt to it? Like it'll just like make them like look weird or something?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Depends on the life that you're talking about. In recent years, they've discovered, so like Chernobyl. Do you guys know about Chernobyl?
I was gonna say that.
Power plant in Ukraine that when it was the Soviet Union exploded, and it was a huge deal. There's a huge chunk of land in Ukraine right now that's not inhabitable anymore because in the 80s, this nuclear explosion, it was a nuclear power plant that melted down is what happened, but it poisoned the land around it. Now, humans don't go there because humans can read the signs that say, stay out of here, you're going to die if you come in here. Can the wolves read the signs? Can the deer read the signs? No, so we're getting a lot of mutated deer and stuff that are being born. If they were exposed enough to the point where all of their DNA and was destroyed, then they would die. They're gone. But ones that had maybe just little things messed up, that then bred, and now their code that says this is how we make a deer is wrong, then you will start getting these mutated, wonky-looking deer that maybe can reproduce, maybe they can't. In the end, kind of. I wish there was just a yes or no. Can they adapt? They can adapt to live, but maybe not in the same way that they did. Like it's a big question. In recent years, some bacteria actually eat radiation, which is weird, but awesome at the same time. Cool. Okay. On the other side of this, DNA is a double helix, and I remember this because the D in DNA. Now, for this, we also get RNA. And RNA is a smaller piece, and we're not going to go crazy into this yet, but when we look at RNA, there's just no deoxy part. What do you think RNA might stand for? Ribonucleic acid. It's ribosomes. Those are what we call the little pieces of it, and it's nucleic acids. So we also have RNA, and both of these are genetic material, ribonucleic acid, that serve different purposes, which we will get into. Okay, now, for these, when we look at nucleic acids, we know that DNA and RNA specifically have this helix or double helix formation. These things are made of smaller pieces known as nucleotides. Now, this one, in my mind, is nice, and this happens in a few places, but nucleic acids are made of nucleotides, and the words like line up perfectly. Okay, for this, nucleotides are composed, and we're not going into super detail. I'm just going to say check it out. We have some elements that are common in here. C for what? N for H for not helium. Hydrogen. O for and P for phosphorus. Now, one thing that I just think is super cool about this is we live on a planet that happens to have a lot of these. So naturally, this is what our bodies use to become bodies, right? Like, this is what's available, it's what we use. If you look back through all the other things that we looked at, the proteins, the carbs, they're all made of essentially the same stuff, right? So it just all depends on how do they join to each other and what is the outcome that it makes in the end. Okay, of these nucleotides, there are a lot of them. And my guess is that you guys can probably finish this sentence because it's kind of become a meme. The mitochondria is the what of the cell? Maybe it's not a meme anymore. The mass. Have you guys ever heard the word mitochondria? Yeah. It's the powerhouse of the cell is the meme. Which maybe that's not anymore. Not in the sense that you're thinking probably. Not like, oh, I'm going to laugh at it meme. But a meme is just, how would you define a meme?
Funny.
Do they have to be? You ever read a meme that's not funny?
No.
What? All of Gen Alpha's memes suck. You've really never seen a meme that's not funny?
Yeah, I've seen a meme that's not funny.
That you don't consider funny? Every meme you've ever seen has been funny? Oh, we're gonna go on a meme hunt here in a bit then.
Just watch Instagram Reels is funny.
But not every single one that you see is funny. Now, in your day.
It's more like information.
All right, so we're just gonna look real quick. So is a joke a meme?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every joke is a meme. Knock knock, who's there? That's a meme.
I would say a meme is like internet funny.
Like relatable.
An image, a video, a piece of text that's typically humorous that's copied and spread rapidly.
Yeah.
So a viral funny. It doesn't have to be funny though. It could be a video. Now memes are videos. They weren't when I was first exposed to memes. But anything that catches on and like permeates throughout all of culture, you could refer to as a meme. So somebody in the 70s or 80s referred to the mitochondria as a powerhouse of a cell, and I bet if you ask anybody who's graduated from United States high schools in the past 40 years, what is a mitochondria? Like, try this later. If you see somebody who went to school here, yeah, ask Russell when you see him, or anybody. Ask any of your teachers here, what's a mitochondria? I would almost bet every single one of them says the powerhouse of the cell. Guaranteed. I can't guarantee it, obviously. Will you guys try to remember to ask your other teachers and tell me what they say tomorrow? Cool. Now, in reality, interesting. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right off the bat. It's where the energy that your cell needs is produced within the cell itself. So it's like literally their power plant of the cell. Okay. Now, what does our power plant use to make energy?
Is it a fossil?
It is a fossil fuel. They literally burn diesel.
Yeah.
Cool. Does every power plant burn diesel? No, there's different types of power plants, right? Now, inside of your cells, there's not a physical power plant that's burning diesel fuel. Pretty sure. I never put diesel fuel in my body. There's not a lot of wind inside of my cells either.
Oh, no. I mean,
That is a good type, though. Yeah, absolutely. Water
hydro.
is a better way to think about it. Now, if we think about how big is a cell? Is it really?
No, like really small.
Like unbelievably small, right? So there's not enough space to make even like a water wheel type idea if we wanted it to work. There's just not enough space to have enough water flowing through to do that. we get energy via chemical reactions. No matter, like, if we burn fuel, it's a chemical reaction that we're getting the energy from. It's happening through burning, but that's all that's happening at that power plant. There must be chemical reactions within me as well that power my cells, because they need energy to run. And we know that they get that power from lipids and carbs, and the energy is moved by proteins and those sorts of things. However, you have to be able to make the energy first. And energy can't be created nor destroyed, so it has to happen in a chemical reaction. One more, and I'm just going to make sure these are starred because guarantee I ask you about these. Guarantee it. Okay, this last one, I guarantee I ask you about it. In cells, the nucleotide, which is just one of these little pieces that makes DNA and other nucleic acids, that produces energy. And I'm going to throw one more in here. I'm sure we see it again. I'm going to say, what is that thing that I called the powerhouse of the cell? Good. So the nucleotide that produces energy in the mitochondria, which is just our big power production plant in our bodies, in each cell, is what we call ATP. ATP is the nucleotide that gives us energy, just like diesel is what makes us energy via the chemical reaction at our power plant. ATP. Now, this one, you need to know it's ATP. Like, I'm fine with that answer, just so we can see it, and I guarantee it shows up again. This is adenosine triphosphate. This, notice, phosphorus shows up here. Adenosine triphosphate, with an E at the end, is what is responsible for your energy. Now, I'm not going to write this part down, but we're going to think about it. If two atoms are bonded together somehow, does it take energy to keep them stuck together, you think?
Yes.
Like a little bit, right? Now, if you have something that breaks that bond, that energy had to go somewhere. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
I can't destroy energy. Like right now, check it out. I'm going to do it the opposite. I'm going to put stuff together, and you're going to verify to me that you know that I've done something with energy. Ready? I'm going to bond my hands together. What's your indication that you know I've used energy? The sound. My hands combine, and the energy leaves as sound. Now,
Disperse.
yeah, the energy, so, yeah, I just changed kinetic energy into sound, is all that's happening. The energy of movement into sound. Now, in the same way, but in the opposite direction, I can't unclap. I wish I could. That'd be weird. But if I unclapped, it's like that sound energy that would have been produced had to go elsewhere, right? Like it can't unclap. I just can't do it. When we break chemical bonds in our body, the energy that was holding them together gets broken, and that energy gets released. And it turns out that that happens thanks to ATP, and that energy powers a cell. Okay. For this, we just finished the chapter. So this evening, and starting now, and you'll be able to get like half of it done, I want you to check out page 57, 1 through 6. Okay. Tomorrow, I haven't done it this year.
Do you take it or just leave it like that?
I'm okay with either. You do you. Yeah, if you're going to look at them and use them again in your notes, is fine. We have a small enough class. I asked you guys to make a couple questions the other day, and I forgot to take them. Did you do it?
I did.
Man, I wrote the bill. Oh.
2 questions and answers. Here's what I'm thinking. I just want your guys' input. I'm no preference either way. Tomorrow, we can do a team test. I'm cool with that, like a practice test sort of thing, because I'm going to make you guys test individually as well. Would you like to help me write questions for it? From the chapter, is that something that sounds interesting to you, or you hate that idea?
Yeah.
If I asked, so tomorrow in class, you're going to help me write the team test, and I'll compile them all together, and it'll serve as a good review guide for us.
Can we turn into questions tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And we'll talk, I'll probably add some more questions for you guys to write, questions and answers tomorrow. Tonight I want you to do this though.
Okay.
So we can ask questions like...
We'll clarify more tomorrow. Don't stress about it right
It's
now.
kind of like, what do I ask? So I was like, we kind of go over everything, so I was like, what is the task?
I mean everything.
More like that.
Kind of, right?
We learned
So,
like the basics.
I'll help you out with it. I'll write a couple questions with you guys, and I'll ask you guys to write some with answers. Because if you guys write all the questions and answers, then like if there's 3 questions from each person, and that's the whole test, then right off the bat you already know 3 of them. I mean, I assume so. If you wrote the questions, hopefully you know the answers because you've written it. But cool. All right, we get 5 minutes. You'll be able to get a good chunk of this done. Let me see if any of those I hate.
Sir Holiday.
Yes, sir.
Remember when I was showing people came here and checked like the volcanoes?
I do.
Are they still planning to change their energy to that?
That is a better question for city council. Yes, I think, but the company that they had hired wasn't doing what they said they were going to do on the timeline that we had agreed to, so they got rid of that company.
Yeah, how does that one go?
What do you mean?
Like, I know